This is Experience Imagination, an award-winning themed entertainment podcast by Falcons Creative Group.
Story connects people to the experience.
Every aspect of creativity is brought together.
We wanted to do something different and fresh.
There are so many different disciplines that are involved in this industry.
Nothing will get you further than your passion.
This entire process is just making us better designers.
We're really pushing the envelope.
Welcome to Experience Imagination. I'm your host, Audrey DeLong. We have been extremely fortunate this year to have one rock star after another accept our invitation to be a guest on the podcast. And I'm thrilled to say we have another one today, although rock star might be an understatement. In a minute, you're going to hear my conversation with Falcon CEO Cecil Megpuri and global entertainment leader and former president of Walt Disney Imagineering, Bob Weiss. Bob spent nearly 4 decades designing iconic theme parks, resorts, and cruise ships for Disney. During his time there, he led more than 200 major projects around the world. Bob still develops innovative entertainment experiences, but he also finds time to write books, both fiction and nonfiction. He's also a speaker, co-founder of the Gensler Global Entertainment Practice, and academic industry advisor to the Savannah College of Art and Design, otherwise known as SCAD. He is a recipient of multiple theme park industry awards, including the Theme Park Entertainment Association's Buzz Price Lifetime Achievement Award and the Marty and Leah Sklar Creative Visionary Award. The man is a legend, there's no other way to say it, and he's here with us next. Well, welcome Bob Weiss and Cecil Megpuri.
Thank you, Audrey, for having us.
Good morning.
Thanks for being here, Bob. I know you're a really busy guy. We're going to talk about what you're up to these days. But first of all, I want to go back and give listeners an idea of your backgrounds, your careers. Where did it all start? How did it all begin?
I'm hoping, Bob, you won't mind if I go first, because I do not want to follow you.
Well, this is a mutual admiration society, so we're okay.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah, let me kind of tell you a little bit. I'm going back, okay? Graduated high school, San Diego, and I started working full-time at 16 because my parents couldn't really afford me paying for homecoming and all these other ancillary things I wanted to do. So I started working at full-time 16, and by the time I graduated high school, I chose architecture as my go-to for my college degree. And so I had to work during the day full-time, and I started as a blueprint boy, entry-level at an architectural firm, and going to school at night for architecture. But that gave me so much experience being in the office and understanding the whole ecosystem of an architectural firm. And what was interesting at the time, I was taking a course in AutoCAD in college where they were starting to automate drafting, which what I was doing, during the day I was hand drafting. At night I was taking courses in AutoCAD. AutoCAD 1.5 was the software I was being introduced to. And my instructor didn't know how to teach it, and I finished the course that evening. It was 40 hours, and I just basically binged through it. And then I ended up teaching the class. And so what was good that I introduced it to the architecture firm that I was working at, and they said, wow, if you can really introduce AutoCAD to help accelerate our drafting, you can accelerate fast. So I immediately became senior CAD designer, and then I got introduced to an opportunity in Los Angeles. So by the time I graduated, I had several years of experience in office practice in an architectural firm, both doing hand drafting and CAD. And then there was this theater design opening at a company called iWorks Entertainment. Mm. And listeners, if you guys don't know about iWorks Entertainment or about the iWorks family, it's important that you look it up. But I learned a little bit about iWorks and found out that Don iWorks was the son of Walt Disney's first business partner in 1919. And he was the co-creator of Mickey Mouse. And so I'm going to go to iWorks Entertainment. This is American history.
Yeah.
So I went up there, and it was a scheduled half-an-hour interview with the head of project management. They were so impressed with my portfolio because I was basically doing innovative environmental design in my degree in architecture, where I was doing underwater environments. I created environmental storytelling, which was a unique thing that separated me from the other students. And they said, you know what? you're doing themed entertainment in your portfolio. And I said, I've never heard of it. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't even know it existed. Right. So then it went to the creative team. So all of a sudden, this was a 4-hour interview. And then finally they said, you know what, you need to meet Don Iwerks. And I'm like, Academy Award-winning Don Iwerks, Mr. Cutting Edge, Circle Vision, Star Tours, 35 years at Disney. So after a couple of years, I said, Don, I need you as a mentor. He goes, I don't know if I have the time. You know, we're busy, we're going public. And he said, if you could meet me at 6 o'clock in the morning every Tuesday, then I'll mentor you on projection design and technology. I'm in.
Yeah.
Count me in. So I was able to be mentored by Don Iwerks, and ultimately I got elevated to work on Virtual Adventures, the very first VR experience in the 90s, way ahead of its time. I was the creative director on the Coca-Cola Pavilion for the World's Expo in Tokyo, and ultimately worked on Terminator 2 and Spider-Man for Universal, doing all the projection design. So that's my foot into the door of entertainment.
That is a unique story. Thanks for sharing that, Cecil.
Great mentorship.
Definitely. Yeah, 6 o'clock, that's not too early.
No.
You didn't have to think about that one.
When this with Don, you know.
All right, Bob, tell us about your background.
Well, I'm also Southern California.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Raised, and I grew up about, at that time, maybe a 45-minute drive from Disneyland. I don't remember a world without Disneyland. By the time I was maybe 3 years old or whatever, we were going once a year. It was usually on my birthday or whatever that weekend was. And then I went to college at Cal Poly Pomona, and I started out like you, Cecil. I started out in theater, set design, illusions, things like that. And then I had a really great instructor who's kind of a genius in our business. His name's Michael Devine. But I had him as a professor, and I showed him some of my drawings, and he said, well, you know, you can stay in theater and you'll probably do a lot of set design, but if you really have the capacity and interest in design, you should go to the architecture department. And I said, I'm not really interested in doing buildings, things like that. And he said, not to be able to necessarily become an architect, just go up there because, as you said, Cecil, and it certainly has impacted your career, the skills that you learn in architecture, the skills you have, the discipline you have is really worthwhile. So I did get in, and I kind of pretty much, Audrey, I divided my time between architecture and theater. I'll say it this way, I did as little in the architecture department as I could to graduate. Still a lot. And I did as much in the theater department I could do, and I tried to balance the two out. And it was the summer, I think of my junior year, I heard that other students were driving over and getting part-time summer jobs at Disneyland. So I went over, I got hired into Disneyland. I was kind of disappointed in the job they gave me. It was an ice cream popcorn vendor, and I was hoping for some creative job. You know, I was like, really? I'm going to stand up there and make popcorn and fan dry ice. But I think back and I realized that the great thing about those roles is you're standing out in Disneyland all day.
Yeah.
And you're working in a place where you see how it functions, you see how people move, you see how the magic really works, and you're responsible for people's time, for what's probably a really important day for them. So I learned a lot from those couple summers I worked there. But I really did not know anything about WED, which is what WDI, Walt Disney Imagineering, was called.
Originally, yeah, right.
It was a pretty secretive group. But the summer that I was at Disneyland, they were building Space Mountain.
Wow.
And I asked, like, well, who does these attractions? You know, and everybody said it's kind of a top secret place. It's called WED. Nobody knows anything about it. And then when I was getting ready to graduate, I was hiking up the hill to the architecture school and carrying my backpack. And I was coming from the theater and had like paint spattered all over my overalls and stuff like that. And I hadn't paid attention. There was a little career fair going on outside. And I saw this table and it said WED. I said, that's the company. And so literally, I went to my locker. We had lockers back then. And I scrambled around for some drawings and some samples and stuff. And I went to see the WED person. And she said, you got a great combination of the architecture and theater is, you know, exactly the kind of storytelling plus design we're looking for. She was incredibly encouraging. And I thought, I didn't even know what I was going to do, and I was set. Just had to graduate, and I'd start at Disney. And one day I got a letter in the mail from WED, and I was like, this is probably my, instructions for the first day, and I was so confident. And it was a rejection letter.
No way. Are you kidding me?
It was a
I had
rejection
no
letter.
idea.
And,
Wow.
And I couldn't believe it. I was like, she was so
Enthusiastic.
She really made it sound
Yeah.
like I was hired right there. And so my sister actually, after I was depressed for about 3 days, my sister finally said, just call them. And I said, never mind, I call them. I said, call them. Maybe they made a mistake. I said, they don't make mistakes. Come on. So I called them, and they said, well, we don't know exactly what happened, but if you want to come out and interview, come on out. And I went out, and I got hired.
Wow.
So
Hey, there's a lesson there.
it was a long journey from being a little kid at Disneyland to starting. And then I have not had the richness that has influenced you, Cecil, which I respect so much, having been, you being at iWorks and Universal and so many great places. I've had more of a focused career, mostly at Disney, but very varied within that, lots of different countries and different designs.
And you had Design Island too, right?
And I had Design Island. I had my own small company.
Yeah, that's where we
But
engaged.
never with the success of Falcons Beyond. You are an unusual success to have just the long-running success that you've had. I'm always admiring you, Cecil, and
Appreciate that,
your
Bob.
your entire operation.
That means a lot. Thank you for that.
We admire him too. I just have to
Yeah,
put
we
that
do.
on record. We would not be here without Cecil, so thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just fascinating stories. And I kind of want to ask before we get too far into the conversation, what are you up to these days, Bob?
Oh, well, I'm people say, are you retired? And I say, absolutely not. I retired from Disney about 18 months or so ago. And I worked with a big architectural company. Actually, the first time in my life I ever worked really for an architecture firm, which is
Right.
Gensler. I decided I'd take a sort of semi-retirement job and go work for the largest architecture firm. But during that time, I began writing heavily because I had 2 books that I was doing before I left Disney, one for Disney Publishing and one for an outside publisher. And I realized, one, how hard it is to write a book. And then once you write it, you think that's done, right? But then you realize, oh my God, now I got to work with the publisher and the editors, and
It doesn't end there after
yeah,
your
so
last
it's a lot.
the end.
It's a lot of work, but the big thing I realized is that I love it. I
Oh, cool.
just absolutely love writing. I love working with the editor, the publishers. So I've got another book coming out from Disney, a 3rd book that they just commissioned me to do. So I
Wow.
have 2 more books with Disney and 1 more with this other publisher called Old Mill Press. So I am writing full time. I
Wow.
wrapped up my Gensler career. I'm still more or less of an advisor to them.
Mm-hmm.
But I get up in the morning and it's writing. Writing is a very solitary business.
Right.
And I love it. Definitely a second career.
That's exciting.
It really is. Wow. I want to ask both of you this question, but we'll start with Bob. What's one of the very first things you learned about designing a large theme park that you've never forgotten?
I didn't have much wet experience within about a year of starting. I was off to Tokyo, and I was in Tokyo during the construction of Tokyo Disneyland, first international park for Disney. And I learned quickly that international collaboration it's exciting, but that you have to approach it in the right way. And by right way, it was like I always approached it as you reach out to the resources that are in the country you're working in, and you take advantage of those talents and they take advantage of your talents. If you approach it with a kind of cultural arrogance that we are the designers or we are the artists or we are the people who know, you're not going to get very far, because you can't just relocate hundreds and hundreds of people every time you want to do something. You miss this beautiful opportunity to work with graphics designers and writers and artists of the place you're going to, a diversity of people. And it just makes, when people talk about the success of Disneyland in Tokyo and how beloved it is by that audience, it has a great deal to do with the fact that it is Disney, but it is also Japan.
Yes.
You would
Right.
When you go to Tokyo Disneyland or Tokyo Disney Sea, there's nowhere else like it because of those cultural influences. So I think because my first job at Disney was working outside the U.S., it influenced everything else I did.
Yeah, really good answer. Cecil.
Well, you know what, Bob? It's crazy. It's the same answer.
Yeah, is it?
Yeah, our first, we opened our doors in 2000. And one of the things we were proud of is that we got solicited to look at OCT, which is the largest operator of theme parks in China. And they wanted to introduce to their market a new type of product. Instead of just a traditional theme park that they had in Shenzhen, they wanted to create an eco theme park. And for some reason, we were selected out of 20 firms. They said that we were the most innovative to think outside the box. We had just finished doing the master plan for the San Diego Zoo. And we used storytelling as a medium for that. And we won that as well. And so one of the things that I thought was interesting was, I hope you're not another arrogant company that's going to tell us what to do. I'm like, well, no, that's not our culture. We definitely, I can't tell you what to do in China. You know your consumers.
Right.
And so I said, look, our process is a data inquiry period. So we showed them our process and methodology. It's a 2.5-day session of us learning from them what they need. And they said, wow, we've never had that before. We thought you were going to come in and just tell us, this is what we do in the U.S. and this is what you need to do. And like, well, I can't even, the canvas is different, right? And so I learned a lot about the Moon Festival and Chinese New Year and the masses come. I think operationally, that was the biggest thing that I sat and went into their theme parks. And I'm like, it's so big and open. And during the non-New Year's time, it looked empty. And I said, you guys are missing your Main Street has too big of a path. It's not intimate, And I showed them pictures of the Main Street and stuff we did at Universal. And they're saying, yeah, that's fine. But now have the whole country off for a week and have them show up in the front door and try to funnel through your 22-foot wide street. I'm like, oh, okay, got it.
Yeah,
so tell me the things that you have to navigate. How do you get the intimacy and still have a wide enough street to manage? They make 90% of their revenue during these two peak times, and that's something that we embraced. And one of the reasons I think we got embraced by a lot of the developers in the region was that we were listeners, not just dictating a solution.
Cultural exchange is such a rich part of what we do.
Exactly. It's so rich.
Yeah. Both of you worked with legendary creatives, people who were inspiring leaders. They set good examples. Tell us about some of those memories.
I remember sitting with Don Iwerks, and we were working on the Star Trek experience in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
And he goes, let me call my friend to help you, Cecil, with the vehicle design, because I was doing all the sight lines. And it was the first time, unlike Star Tours, I decided to have the projection off-board and in a dome experience so the parallaxing could be more natural, like a real vehicle.
Yeah.
And so he said, I don't know, do you know Bob Gurr? I'm like, the legend? And so Bob shows up in his 70s car, and here I am designing the Star Trek vehicle alongside working sightlines with Bob Gurr and Don Iwerks.
Two legends.
Two legends.
Yeah,
Like,
awesome.
That's an awesome experience.
Well, and I think we have those experiences with those legends. I don't know about you, Cecil, but when I think about Gurr, who I've known for years, but I also worked with John Hench and with Bill Martin and Exitencio and Colin Campbell. They were just kind of regular folks, Joyce Carlson knew more about Small World than anybody alive. Harriet Burns, that an amazing group of people who had done such amazing things, but they were just kind of, oh yeah, here, go do that for me. They would kind of point, go do that. Because they knew we didn't know anything. At the time, now I wish I could go back. Now I wish I could go back and talk to them more.
Yeah, I would have drilled them more in that room instead of. Yeah. We were problem solving, and it was nice. And I think he recognized that I understood what he was talking about, and so he could talk shorthand, and it gave me comfort that I was holding my own in the room. But man, if I had a chance to, can we have a cup of coffee and talk further?
Yeah, I used to hang out once in a while on the back patio with Herbie Ryman. And, Herb is one of the greatest artists in history, including Disney's history. But
Yeah.
but he was a huge procrastinator. He just likes to talk and wander around. And he would draw. He did everything at the last minute. So he'd think about it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then he'd draw it the night before or
Oh
whatever.
my
That's
gosh.
his thing. And there's an immediacy when you look at Herb's drawings. There is an immediacy to them, like
Right.
paint's thrown on a canvas, right?
Right. It's not calculated and
not calculated.
procured.
But he'd kind of 10 o'clock in the morning, he would go by, you'd see him out there talking to somebody, and they'd go back to work, and he'd go over to the next table and talk to somebody else. It's the greatest, It's the
Oh
greatest.
my gosh.
There's great memories. I'm writing this. I'm getting off track, Audrey, but I'm writing this massive book on Marty Sklar, and which is the next one I'm doing for Disney, and it has stirred up just so many memories in me, but also everybody I've talked to about just so many of the people in the business, and people not necessarily just in Disney business, but Ray Bradbury and other folks related to the park business who've been a part of it. It's just, I think that we've reached this stage where the theme park, as a truly kind of an American invention, as the storytelling parks as we know them here, and now are traveling around the world too, have reached this point where they're accepted as for their cultural value and interesting to people for their cultural histories. And so maybe the histories of people and artists and designers and people who worked on these things, engineers, is getting to be more interesting to people because, before we were all kind of on the background, unknown, Cecil and I and many of our colleagues, kind of anonymous. So, the backstage,
Exactly.
It's okay to be backstage. It's all right to be backstage.
Yeah.
But I think people have become more interested in what goes into these things.
Yeah. The masses know this medium now. And
they know there's somebody behind the curtain.
Exactly. My brush with Marty was we were able to renovate Spaceship Earth, the post show, and Eric Jacobson was kind of our contact there, and he thought it was important that Marty kind of buy off before it opened because it wasn't a WDI designed scenario. AT&T was the sponsor, and they were the ones who invested. And I just remember the pressure of that we had having him come in and to kind of look at it, and he really gave us the attaboy and said he really liked how we used 3 million marbles under the glass floor as an aggregate to hide all the conduit. And he, out of all this environment, he honed in on one of the most challenging things that we had to deal with. Was you have a glass floor, but you have to show off all the ugliness. We painted it midnight blue. We did that whole thing, but all the conduit was still there because we had lighting, theatrical lighting underneath it to glow. And he immediately recognized how innovative we thought of pouring these right away. He honed in on the most challenging thing and how we, overcame it and pointed it out. And so that was a really magical moment for me to have Marty Sklar say, attaboy. Good job.
Surreal, yeah.
Yeah, it was really rewarding.
Cecil, back in the early days of Falcons, you were working in China when not many other themed entertainment companies were. How did that all come
Very few
about?
Western companies were being engaged at the time. And, 9/11 happened, and the domestic market was, frozen, at that point. And fortunately, we had already gotten our foot in the door out there, and we were successful. And then we landed a pretty significant job for the casino market, which had a lot of capital. And so Macau, Dragon's Treasure, was a big moment for us. And Tony Baxter gave us the Thea Award for that, which was another rewarding time for me to actually have Tony give me a Thea Award for Dragon's Treasure. And he was saying, the stuff that people are doing today, it's so innovative, for him to say that. Because it was the world's largest projection dome in the world at 6K resolution, 60 frames per second, 120 feet in diameter, 550 guests pulsing through every 12 minutes, So we were really proud of that.
Yeah.
And I think that I got your attention, Bob. I know you invited me to come take a look at what you guys were doing in Shanghai, and there was an opportunity for us to potentially get some scope at the time. But I know that didn't pan out. But it was an opportunity for us to maybe help because of our experience in China.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think back to when I first got involved in Shanghai, and it was the beginning of about 7 years of work. It's staggering how little Americans knew about Chinese and actually how little Chinese knew about Americans.
Yeah,
Oh,
right.
We did find that there was more knowledge of Disney films and animation than we were led to believe. So more kids knew The Little Mermaid and things like that. And so we spent a lot of time. I think the important thing was going there. We did family visits, a couple of us at a time. We would go to people's homes and
Wow.
have lunch with their families, talk to their kids. We'd go to schools, talk to junior high school, middle school kids,
Wow.
talk to the teachers. We really fanned out a lot to try to get to know where we were working. One of the earliest things I said is we need Imagineers who are Chinese, but we need people just working with us. And so we fanned out and looked in Los Angeles for people who had done graduate school here and still had visas to stay in the U.S. for another year or so. We found students at SCAD who were in design and animation who had come from Beijing. We found writers. I really wanted just an extension of Imagineers. And some of those, the woman who joined, she joined as I think a junior, and then after her senior year at SCAD, she came to Glendale with us. She's now the head of art direction for the Magic Kingdom in Shanghai.
Wow. What a journey.
And this was something that I had wanted to do for a long time. We empowered the local teams and just discovered even more how great they were and how they always stepped up. They always made things happen. So it was realizing and emphasizing the fact that talent is not only around the world, but it's critical to every project.
Yeah, talking about Shanghai, which opened in 2016, I'm curious how you determine which IPs to put in that park and feature.
We were trying to find a balance between Disneyland, what is a Disneyland, and then not have too many preconceptions about what was known over there. And two things happened at the midpoint of Shanghai. The company acquired Lucasfilm, and the company earlier than that had acquired Marvel. And so both of those acquisitions were too late to add them in. I remember taking a group of our advisors to Disneyland to ride Pirates of the Caribbean because I felt like Pirates was kind of like in the DNA of the park. And there had also been like 5 movies by that time or something like that that had been internationally distributed. And they were not impressed by Pirates at all. And yet the movies were really, extraordinarily well received in China. So that's what led us to redesigning Pirates completely.
Oh my God, that's one of my favorite attractions.
We thought it was important to have it, but we knew we couldn't just duplicate what we had because the perception of the audience would have come from the movies, not from previous experience at Disneyland.
Right.
We knew we were building Disneyland, but we were trying to make improvements and
react to the canvas, right, of where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Wow, what great insight.
It really is.
I love it. Oh my gosh.
I'm really curious too, and I think the listeners might want to know this, is, when you're Disney, you're going to face a high level of scrutiny. Everybody's going to be looking at everything you produce with a critical eye.
When you're at the top, right? When you're
exactly. Everybody wants to take you down a peg, I mean, did you guys feel pressure? Did it affect how you designed?
The great thing about Shanghai Disneyland was it was probably the most difficult project I've ever worked on for a lot of reasons. But it was Bob Iger's first park from the ground up. But this was his Disneyland. And he put great importance behind the relationship between Disney and China. And so we had him with us all the way, through creative, through development. So as hard as it was, I think we always felt supported. When we, stepped out there and said, we're going to do something completely different here, he was always really ready to innovate and ready to, try to make things more interesting. So when you have to deliver really tough news, which we had to do on Shanghai sometimes usually about schedule
trends,
hard to get it done. It's a lot easier when your boss has been there with you, has seen it, has walked it.
Gets the challenges, right?
Came many times during the construction. He walked with us through the mud and the dirt and the heat, and so he knew what we were all doing. So when he'd say, "When are you going to open?" We'd say, "We can't tell you. We don't have any idea."
Oh man,
he understood.
Yeah.
Eventually we got there, but
Wow.
it wasn't an easy road.
Yeah, I bet. Talking about creative leadership, I'm sure you have to understand a lot about human beings and psychology, which we've talked about on this podcast, in order to direct your teams to design an unforgettable guest experience. So give us a peek behind what you're thinking there.
As an individual, a lot of that skill set is inherent in my own journey, right? So I'm a creative at heart, but I also loved a lot about technology, and I love a lot about efficiency and project management. And so for me as an individual, I have a love for all those: graphics, composition, art, and also what it takes to get things out of the ground on time and on budget. I really relish in the success of that as well. So for me, I start to look at resources as we grow our company that has a kind of a good understanding of every one of those lanes, because all those factors equal success. And so when I look for resources, it may be for a creative role, but if they have the sensitivity and understanding of the other factors that they have to be adjacent to, then there's a respect there. Then there's more success in those individuals. Instead of being adversarial with those other lanes, they become more complementary. The more knowledge about the process and how these individuals, as we grow the company, understand and respect those other lanes, there's a better chance of success.
Yeah.
One thing you learn from this business, I think, is everybody processes information differently.
Right.
And you have introverts, you have extroverts, you have artists, you have design thinkers. You have such a diversity of thought that you have to be open to trying to get to know people and get to know their way of doing it. If you try to get them all to fit through one gateway, a certain way of working, you will lose the opportunity to work with really amazing people, because you won't realize that you overlooked somebody because they just think about it differently, or they, like I said about Herb Ryman, who had this reputation as a procrastinator, but what genius came out at the other end of that time period, right?
Right.
So everybody's different. Some people plan, some people do it all at once. Some people speak out loud all the time. Some people don't talk until the very end. It's just, they're all very different. Your job is to treat people like a natural resource, an amazing natural resource, and try to guide them in such a way that they are able to do their best work and contribute the most they possibly can.
Yeah, and create that kind of warm, welcoming environment that makes them prosper. Yeah.
I'm so appreciative to have both the time with both of you, Audrey and Cecil, but also to reconnect with you, Cecil, and your group, with Falcons Beyond. Amazing work you're all doing. I feel like we're all colleagues in this business. We're all friends. We're all supporters of each other. And I just love being a part of these kind of conversations. So I really thank you.
Very cool of you to join us. And we look forward to talking again.
Anytime. Yeah, I hope so.
Thanks, Bob.
All right. Take care, folks.
That was a special treat for me and hopefully everyone who listened. Bob is a busy guy, so we appreciate him taking the time to speak with me and Cecil today. And also, a thank you to Mary, Bob's wife, for helping organize this session. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next month when I sit down with 3 designers who will give you an inside look at master planning. Thank you for listening to Experience Imagination, a Falcons Creative Group production. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast. Be sure to check out falconscreativegroup.com and follow us on Instagram, X, Facebook, and LinkedIn. If you have ideas for future episodes or just want to drop us a message, send an email to podcast@falconscreativegroup.com.